The air felt different that day on Flight 873, not because of turbulence or weather patterns, but because of the invisible storm brewing in Seat 1A. Sometimes the most powerful moments happen in silence. This is one of those stories. For Ethelinda Crane, luxury travel was routine. As CEO of Crane Innovations, a tech empire valued at $4.2 billion, she had earned her place in first class 1,000 times over. But on this flight, somewhere over the Atlantic, she would discover that her success, her position, her very dignity, none of it mattered to the crew who saw only the color of her skin. What happened next would change an entire airline forever. The flight attendant never expected that denying one meal would cost 8 people their jobs, but that's precisely what occurred after Ethelinda Crane was treated as if she didn't belong. In just under 3 hours, an elite flight crew would go from serving champagne to clearing out their lockers, and not a single voice would be raised to make it happen. The distinctive chime of the first-class boarding call echoed through Geneva International Airport's Terminal A. Ethelinda Crane moved with practiced efficiency, her tailored charcoal suit a stark contrast against the bustling crowd. At 43, she carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from years of commanding boardrooms and closing 9-figure deals. As she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, she received the customary smile, the kind reserved for premium passengers. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Crane." Ethelinda nodded politely as she strode down the jet bridge. Her mind was already 3 steps ahead, focused on tomorrow's merger discussion in London. The Harrington acquisition had been months in the making, and as CEO of Crane Innovations, she had personally overseen every detail. This wasn't just another business deal, it was the cornerstone of her 5-year expansion strategy into the European market. The cabin of the Boeing 787 Dreamliner gleamed under soft lighting as she stepped aboard. The lead flight attendant, a man with silver temples and a practiced smile, greeted her at the door. "Welcome aboard, ma'am," he said, his eyes flicking briefly to her face before looking past her. "May I help you find your seat?" 1A, Ethelinda replied, already moving past him. She didn't need assistance. She had flown this route 16 times in the past year alone. The first-class cabin was half filled with passengers settling in. All men, all white. The quiet murmur of their conversations filled the space as Ethelinda took her seat by the window. She placed her leather portfolio on the side table and checked her watch. 3 hours to London, just enough time to finalize her presentation notes. Pre-departure champagne. She looked up to see a flight attendant. His name tag read Thurston Pruitt, holding a tray of flutes. His smile tightened almost imperceptibly as their eyes met. "Water, please," Ethelinda said, returning to her portfolio. The attendant lingered a half-second too long before moving on. It was subtle, the kind of hesitation most would miss. But Ethelinda didn't miss much. She had survived 20 years in an industry that had expected her to fail from day one. Her awareness was her armor. If you're enjoying this story so far, let me know in the comments what you might have done in Ethelinda's shoes. Would you have immediately called out the flight attendant, or would you have stayed quiet like she did? Drop your thoughts below. I'd love to know what you think while we continue this incredible story. As the final passengers boarded, Ethelinda opened the airline's app on her tablet. She had pre-ordered the premium meal option, seared sea bass with truffle risotto, a small luxury she allowed herself on long flights. The confirmation was there, along with her preference for window seating and still water. All confirmed, all in order. The cabin doors closed with a heavy thud, and the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, welcoming passengers aboard the 3-hour flight to London Heathrow. Ethelinda half listened as she reviewed her notes, highlighting key points for tomorrow's presentation. "Excuse me." She glanced up to find another flight attendant, a woman with blonde hair pulled into a tight bun standing beside her seat. Her name tag read Dorcas Ellery. "We'll be serving meal service shortly after takeoff," she said, placing a menu on Ethelinda's tray table. "Would you like to make your selection now?" Ethelinda looked at the menu, then back at the attendant. "I've already pre-ordered the sea bass. It should be in your system." Something flashed across Dorcas's face, surprise or perhaps irritation, before she smiled again. "Let me check on that for you." The flight attendant moved away, disappearing behind the galley curtain. Through the gap, Ethelinda could see her in conversation with Thurston, their heads bent together, voices low. Thurston glanced in her direction, then quickly away. The plane pushed back from the gate, the engines rumbling to life. Ethelinda returned to her notes, but a tendril of unease had begun to curl in her stomach. 20 years of navigating corporate America, as a black woman, had taught her to recognize the signs. Something wasn't right. 40 minutes into the flight, the meal service began. Ethelinda watched as Thurston and Dorcas moved efficiently through the cabin, laying white linen cloths on tray tables and presenting the first course, a delicate saffron soup garnished with microgreens, to the passengers across the aisle. The aroma of the soup reached her, rich and inviting. She closed her portfolio and waited. Dorcas approached her seat, but instead of the soup, she carried a plastic-wrapped sandwich, the kind served in economy class. "I'm sorry, Miss Crane," she said, placing the sandwich on Ethelinda's tray table. "It seems we don't have your pre-ordered meal on the manifest. This is all we can offer you at this time." Ethelinda stared at the sandwich, turkey and cheese on white bread, a stark contrast to the gourmet soup being served just feet away. "There must be some mistake," she said evenly. "I confirmed my meal selection last night." Dorcas's smile remained fixed. "These things happen sometimes. Systems glitch." She gestured at the sandwich. "This is all we have available." Ethelinda's gaze shifted to the other passengers. Every one of them had received the first course of the premium meal service. She could see the second flight attendant, Thurston, opening a bottle of red wine for an older gentleman 3 rows ahead. "Is this happening with any other passengers?" Ethelinda asked, her voice deliberately calm. A flicker of something annoyance, discomfort, crossed Dorcas's face. "We have to prioritize certain guests sometimes," she said, her voice dropping slightly. "You understand." The implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Ethelinda looked at the sandwich again, then back at Dorcas. "I see. Will there be anything else?" Dorcas asked, already half turned away. "No," Ethelinda said. "Thank you." As Dorcas moved away, Ethelinda remained perfectly still, her hands resting on the armrests. She did not touch the sandwich. Instead, she watched as the other passengers were served their appetizers, followed by the main course, including several plates of the sea bass she had ordered. The cabin hummed with quiet conversation and the clink of silverware against fine china. She was the only passenger eating nothing, the plastic-wrapped sandwich untouched on her tray table, a visible reminder of exclusion. Thurston passed by her seat twice, never making eye contact. From the galley she could hear laughter, Thurston and Dorcas, joined by a third crew member. Their voices lowered whenever passengers walked past, but rose again once they were alone. Ethelinda reached for her phone. This wasn't the first time she had faced discrimination, but it would be the last time she would face it silently. Her company, Crane Innovations, had recently acquired a significant stake in the airline's parent corporation, a detail that apparently the crew was unaware of. She opened her secure messaging app and typed a brief message to her executive assistant. "Lemuel, I need information. Current flight crew of Atlantic Premier Flight 873, Geneva to London. Full profiles, background checks, customer complaint history, priority level, immediate." She hesitated before sending, then added, "Also request access to cabin surveillance for this flight. Timestamp 9:15 to 9:45 a.m. Emergency Protocol Authorization, EC 7721. She pressed send, then turned her attention back to her portfolio. Outwardly nothing had changed. She appeared as calm and focused as ever, but inside a quiet determination had taken hold. The meal service continued around her. Dessert carts rolled through the cabin, offering crème brûlée and chocolate soufflé. Wine glasses were refilled. Coffee was served in delicate porcelain cups. Ethelinda's tray table remained occupied only by the untouched sandwich. "We're about to see how Ethelinda handles this situation, and trust me, you won't believe what happens next." If you're feeling the tension building, hit that comment button right now and tell me if you've ever witnessed or experienced discrimination like this. Your comments help others find this video. In the sleek corporate headquarters of Crane Innovations, Lemuel Corbett frowned at his computer screen. It was nearly midnight in Chicago, but when Ethelinda Crane sent a priority message, time zones became irrelevant. The message had triggered a cascade of protocols. As Ethelinda's chief of staff for the past 7 years, Lemuel had developed an almost supernatural ability to anticipate her needs. But this request was different. The emergency protocol authorization was rarely used, only in situations where immediate action was required. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he accessed the airline's secure employee database. As a major stakeholder, Crane Innovations had negotiated access privileges that few outside the airline's executive team possessed. Within minutes, the profiles of the Flight 873 crew appeared on his screen. What he found made his frown deepen. Thurston Pruitt, 15 years with the airline. Senior cabin crew. 3 previous complaints of selective service, all filed by passengers of color, all dismissed without investigation. Dorcas Ellery, 8 years with the airline. 4 customer complaints for rudeness and discriminatory behavior, all marked resolved with no disciplinary action. The pattern continued through the rest of the crew's files. Subtle infractions, disguised as service issues, all systematically ignored by management. Lemuel moved to his second task, accessing the cabin surveillance. As part of a recent security upgrade, all first-class cabins had been equipped with discrete audio-visual monitoring. The footage was typically only accessed in cases of security threats or passenger misconduct. This qualified as both. The video loaded on his screen. The camera angle captured most of the first-class cabin, including Ethelinda's seat. He watched the meal service unfold exactly as she had described, but it was the audio that made his blood boil. He could hear Thurston and Dorcas in the galley, their voices low but distinct. "She acts like she belongs here," Thurston was saying, amusement in his voice. "Probably used all her points for an upgrade," Dorcas replied. "Did you see her face when I gave her the sandwich? Classic, like she expected the royal treatment. Well, she's not getting the C base. I saved that for Mr. Phillips in 3C. He's a real premium passenger." Their laughter was soft but unmistakable. Lemuel's jaw tightened as he continued watching. He had seen enough. He compiled the evidence, crew profiles, complaint histories, and the damning surveillance footage into a secure file, and sent it to Ethelinda's private server with a simple message: "All evidence secured. Patterns identified. Awaiting your instructions." Back on the plane, Ethelinda's phone vibrated with Lemuel's response. She reviewed the file quickly, her expression unchanged as she absorbed the information. The evidence confirmed what she had already known in her gut. This wasn't an isolated incident or a system error. It was deliberate, systematic, and it had been happening for years. She typed her response: "Inform HR Director Orville Haskett. Have him meet the flight at Heathrow with a full team. Authorization to terminate entire cabin crew upon landing. Code Black Protocol." She pressed send, then turned off her phone and returned it to her bag. The hard part was done. Now she would wait. For the remainder of the flight, Ethelinda sat in perfect stillness, her face a mask of professional detachment. She didn't engage with the flight attendants. She didn't complain. She didn't make a scene. She didn't need to. The wheels were already in motion. While Ethelinda sat in calculated silence, corporate machinery was grinding into action across 2 continents. In the Chicago headquarters, Lemuel had initiated the rarely used Code Black Protocol, a procedure developed specifically for high-level corporate emergencies. Within minutes, the airline's London office had been notified, security teams mobilized, and HR Director Orville Haskett pulled from a budget meeting. Orville Haskett was known for his unflappable demeanor, but as he reviewed the evidence compiled by Lemuel, his face darkened. The airline had been working to rebuild its reputation after a series of PR disasters. This incident could undo months of careful brand rehabilitation. More importantly, it represented everything the company claimed to stand against. He made 3 calls in rapid succession to the head of security, to the airline's chief operating officer, and to the legal team. Each conversation was brief, direct, and ended with the same instruction: no leaks.
total confidentiality, until resolution. Meanwhile, the flight continued its journey across Europe, the crew blissfully unaware of what awaited them. In the cabin, Thurston and Dorcas moved with the practiced efficiency of veteran flight attendants, attending to the other passengers with attentive sufficiency of veteran flight attendants, attending to the other passengers with attentive service. They occasionally glanced at Ethelinda, who appeared absorbed in her work, seemingly unbothered by the sandwich that remained untouched on her tray table. If they noticed her calm demeanor as unusual, they gave no indication. Their assumption that she had accepted her place was their first mistake. Their second mistake was thinking they were untouchable. An hour into the flight, Dorcas approached Ethelinda's seat again. "Would you like me to remove that for you?" she asked, gesturing to the sandwich. "Would you like me to remove that for you?" she asked, gesturing to the sandwich. Ethelinda looked up, her expression neutral. "Yes, thank you." As Dorcas reached for the tray, Ethelinda added. As Dorcas reached for the tray, Ethelinda added, "I'd also like a glass of water, please." "Of course," Dorcas replied, her tone professional but cool. When she returned with the water, Ethelinda accepted it with a polite nod, but said nothing more. Said nothing more. The interaction was brief, unremarkable. Said nothing more. Said nothing more. The polite nod, the kind that happens thousands of times on flights around the world, every day. But this one was being recorded, analyzed, and added to the growing file that would determine the fate of every running flight. As the flight began its descent into London, the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing. As the flight began its descent into London, the captain's voice came over the intercom, announcing their approach to Heathrow. The usual preparations began. Tray tables stowed, seats returned to their upright positions, last-minute trips to the lavatories. Ethelinda closed her portfolio and looked out the window at the patchwork of London, suburbs below. Her face revealed nothing of what was to come. In the terminal at Heathrow, Otha Bahaskett stood with a team of 3 security personnel and 3 HO security personnel and 3 HO representatives. All wore the airline's corporate uniform, but without the usual customer service smiles. Their expressions were grim, their posture tense. They were positioned near the jet bridge entrance, outside of the clear view of the arriving crew. Arriving crew. Overly checked his watch. The flight had landed on time. The cabin crew would exit the aircraft on the last passenger. They had rehearsed the procedure twice. Swift, discreet, and absolute. There would be no public confrontation, no dramatic scene. Just the cold, efficient execution of corporate justice.
The flight has landed, but the crew has no idea what's waiting for them. This is where things get really intense. If you haven't commented yet, now's the time. What do you think is about to happen to this flight crew? Let me know in the comments section below. While we continue with this unforgettable story, the Airbus A350's wheels touched down on Heathrow's runway with a gentle squeal. The cabin erupted in the usual chorus of seatbelt clicks and overhead compartment preparations. Ethelinda remained seated, watching as the other first-class passengers gathered their belongings. As she waited for the deplaning process to begin, Thurston passed by her seat one last time. "Thank you for flying with us today," he said, the words automatic, his eyes already moving to the passenger behind her. Ethelinda looked at him directly. It was an illuminating experience. Something in her tone made him pause, but the moment passed quickly as he continued down the aisle, unaware that it was the last time he would ever work a flight. When the last passenger had deplaned, Ethelinda stood, collected her portfolio, and walked unhurriedly toward the exit. Dorcas stood at the door, offering the same practiced farewell she had given to every passenger. "Thank you for flying with us today, Miss Crane. We hope to see you again soon." Ethelinda paused. "Oh, you will," she said softly, "just not in the way you expect." Before Dorcas could respond, Ethelinda stepped into the jet bridge. She didn't look back to see the confusion on the flight attendant's face. As she emerged into the terminal, a man in a dark suit approached her. "Miss Crane, I'm Orville Haskett, HR Director. Everything is in place, as requested." "Thank you, Orville," she said, falling into step beside him. "Are we clear on the approach?" "Absolutely. The team is in position. The crew will be intercepted as soon as they exit the aircraft. Private room is prepared for the proceedings. Good. I want this handled with discretion. They walked in silence through the terminal, bypassing the main concourse to enter a private corridor reserved for airline staff. At the end of the hallway, a door marked staff only led to a conference room where 3 HR representatives waited. I'll observe from here, Ethelinda said, indicating a one-way glass panel that looked into an adjacent room. Keep it brief, but make sure they understand exactly why this is happening. Orville nodded and entered the second room, leaving Ethelinda alone to watch the proceedings. Minutes later, the cabin crew of Flight 873 was escorted into the room by security personnel. Their expressions ranged from confusion to alarm as they were directed to sit at a long table facing Orville and the HR team. Through the glass, Ethelinda could see Thurston leaning toward Dorcas, whispering something. Dorcas's eyes were wide, her posture rigid with tension. Orville placed a tablet on the table and activated it. The screen displayed the airline's logo briefly before transitioning to the surveillance footage from the flight. Thurston and Dorcas in the galley, their voices crystal clear as they mocked Ethelinda and deliberately denied her the meal she had ordered. The color drained from Dorcas's face. Thurston sat perfectly still, his jaw clenched. "This meeting will be brief," Orville began, his voice calm but firm. "The footage you're watching was captured during today's Flight 873 from Geneva to London. It clearly shows discriminatory behavior toward a first-class passenger, Miss Ethelinda Crane." He paused to let the information sink in. Miss Crane is not only a premium passenger but also the CEO of Crane Innovations, which as of last quarter owns 27% of our parent company. A visible ripple of shock moved through the crew. One of the younger attendants put her head in her hands. "Your personnel files," Orville continued, "reveal a pattern of similar incidents, all systematically ignored by previous management. That ends today." He placed 8 identical envelopes on the table. "Effective immediately, all of you are terminated from your positions with Atlantic Premier Airlines. These documents outline the terms of your separation, including the forfeiture of all benefits and the permanent record of the cause for termination." Thurston was the first to find his voice. This is outrageous. You can't fire an entire crew over one misunderstanding." "This was not a misunderstanding," Orville replied evenly. "Your own words caught on camera make that perfectly clear. And this is not about one incident. This is about a pattern of behavior that reflects a systemic failure, one that the company is now addressing at every level." He gestured to the security personnel standing by the door. "You will be escorted to collect your personal belongings. Your airline credentials have already been deactivated. There will be no appeals process." The room erupted in protests and pleas, but Orville remained unmoved. The decision had been made at the highest level. There was nothing to discuss. From behind the glass, Ethelinda watched without expression as the crew was escorted from the room. This wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability, a concept that had been foreign to this airline for too long. She turned away from the window and checked her watch. The Harrington meeting was in 3 hours. She had time to return to her hotel, refresh and prepare. The incident on the flight was already receding in her mind, just another obstacle navigated in a career full of them. Her phone buzzed with a message from Lemuel, board chairman requesting urgent meeting tomorrow morning. "Your actions have triggered full review of service protocols across all routes." She smiled slightly as she typed her response. "Good. Schedule for 8 a.m. Have data ready on all discrimination complaints from past 24 months. Time for real change." 2 days later, Ethelinda Crane stood before the airline's full board of directors in their London headquarters. The boardroom, with its wall of windows overlooking the Thames, was silent as she concluded her presentation. "Gentlemen, ladies," she said, her voice steady and clear, "what happened on Flight 873 was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a much deeper problem, one that has been festering within your corporate culture for years." She gestured to the screen behind her, where data points highlighted patterns of selective service, discriminatory treatment, and systematically ignored complaints. The termination of that crew was necessary, but it's only the beginning. Real change requires more than removing a few bad actors. It requires a fundamental restructuring of how this airline views service, inclusivity, and respect. The board chairman, a silver-haired man with decades in the industry, leaned forward. What exactly are you proposing, Miss Crane? Ethelinda advanced to the next slide, a comprehensive plan titled Cultural Reset Initiative, a complete overhaul, new training protocols for all customer-facing staff, revised complaint resolution procedures with mandatory investigation of all discrimination claims, independent audits of service quality across all routes and cabin classes, and most importantly, a zero-tolerance policy for discriminatory behavior at every level of the organization. She paused, looking each board member in the eye. As a major stakeholder, Crane Innovations has the authority to insist on these changes, but I'm not here to dictate terms. I'm here to offer partnership in creating an airline that truly values every passenger regardless of race, gender, or background. The room was quiet as the board absorbed her words. Some faces showed resistance, others resignation, but a few, the younger members, primarily showed genuine engagement. The chairman spoke again. Implementation of these changes would require significant resources. The cost would be far less than the cost of continued discrimination. Ethelinda interrupted smoothly, both in terms of public relations and in simple human dignity. This isn't just about doing what's right, though that should be enough. It's also smart business. Inclusive service isn't just ethical, it's profitable. She closed her portfolio with a decisive snap. My team has prepared detailed implementation plans for each phase of the initiative. We're prepared to offer our expertise in organizational transformation to ensure a smooth transition. Her tone made it clear that this wasn't a request, it was a requirement. After nearly an hour of discussion, questions, and occasional resistance, the board voted. The Cultural Reset Initiative was approved unanimously, with Ethelinda appointed to head the Oversight Committee. As she left the boardroom, the chairman fell into step beside her. That was quite a presentation, Miss Crane. Thank you, she replied simply. I have to ask why this approach? You could have gone public, created a media firestorm. The airline would have been forced to make changes anyway, probably with significant financial compensation to you personally. Ethelinda stopped walking and turned to face him directly. This was never about me, or about money. It was about fixing a broken system. Public shaming might force temporary changes, but real transformation comes from within. She smiled slightly. Besides, I'm more interested in building things than burning them down. 6 months later, Ethelinda Crane found herself once again in Seat 1A on Flight 873 from Geneva to London. The cabin looked the same. Plush leather seats, soft lighting, the quiet hum of conversation. But the atmosphere was different. The lead flight attendant, a young man named Carter, greeted her by name as she boarded. Welcome aboard, Miss Crane. It's an honor to have you with us today. As the meal service began, Carter approached her seat. Your pre-ordered sea bass, Miss Crane, he said, placing the elegantly presented dish before her, and the wine you requested. Thank you, Carter. As he turned to leave, he handed her a small envelope. From the crew, Ethelinda opened it after he had gone. Inside was a simple note, handwritten on airline stationery. Thank you for holding the line. We're proud to serve with integrity because of your courage. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her jacket pocket. Outside the window, the clouds stretched endlessly below, white and pristine in the afternoon sun. Ethelinda took a sip of her wine and allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. True power, she had learned long ago, wasn't about making noise. It was about making change. Not through public confrontation or dramatic displays, but through precise, deliberate action. The kind of action that transformed not just one flight, but an entire culture. The kind of action that ensured the next black woman in Seat 1A would never have to question whether she belonged there. That, Ethelinda thought as the plane soared higher, was the only victory that truly mattered. Thank you for watching this powerful story of accountability and change. If it resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support more content like this. Share your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss our next upload.